In the previous episode of Satansplain, we took an overall look at the Satanic Rituals, the 1972 book released as a companion to the Satanic Bible, as well as the reasons for Satanic Ritual itself and debunking some misconceptions. And now in part 2 of a 3-part exploration of the Satanic Rituals, we will take a look at some of the actual rituals found in the book. And if you mistakenly thought Satanic Ritual was limited to Christian blasphemy, well, you're in for quite a Satansplaining.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. This is the second of 3 episodes on the Satanic Rituals. My original plan was to do everything in one episode, but as I found more and more side points I had to make, I realized it was best to split this into 3 episodes. So if you have not listened to part 1, I urge you to listen to that first before listening to this episode. In any case, let's now pick up where we left off at the end of part 1. At the end of part 1, we finally got around to opening the book, The Satanic Rituals, and going over the title and the dedication pages. What follows after that is the book's introduction. I'm going to read you some of that introduction, which was written by Anton LaVey on Christmas Day, 1971. Quote, "The rituals contained herein represent a degree of candor not usually found in a magical curriculum. They all have one thing in common: homage to the elements truly representative of the other side. The devil and his works have long assumed many forms. Until recently, to Catholics, Protestants were the devils. To Protestants, Catholics were devils. To both, Jews were devils. To the Oriental, the Westerner was a devil. To the American settler of the Old West, the red man was a devil. Man's ugly habit of elevating himself by defaming others is an unfortunate phenomenon, yet apparently necessary to his emotional well-being. Though these precepts are diminishing in power, to virtually everyone, some group represents evil incarnate. Yet if a human being ever thinks that someone else considers him wrong or evil or expendable in the affairs of the world, that thought is quickly banished. Few wish to carry the stigma of villain. But wait, we are experiencing one of those unique periods in history when the villain consistently becomes heroic. The cult of the anti-hero has exalted the rebel and the malefactor. Because man does little in moderation, selective acceptance of new and revolutionary themes is non-existent. Consequently, all is chaos and anything goes, however irrational, that is against established policy. Causes are a dime a dozen. Rebellion for rebellion's sake often takes precedence over genuine need for change. The opposite has become desirable. Hence, this becomes the age of Satan. So that's an excerpt from the book's introduction. I think it speaks for itself. After this introduction chapter, there's a good 20 pages or so that makes up the next chapter in the book, and that's called Concerning the Rituals. Now, if you are a Satanist and aren't even going to be performing any group rituals anytime soon, I would argue this book is still worth the money for this chapter alone. I think I've read some of this chapter in some previous episodes, so it expands a lot on what was already talked about in detail in the Satanic Bible, in the Book of Belial, but I'm going to read you some excerpts now. Fantasy plays an important part in any religious curriculum, for the subjective mind is less discriminating about the quality of food than it is about the taste. The religious rites of Satanism differ from those of other faiths in that fantasy is not employed to control the practitioners of the rites. The ingredients of Satanic ritual are not designed to hold the celebrant in thrall, but rather serve his goals. Thus, fantasy is utilized as a magic weapon by the individual rather than by the system. Okay, so this kind of echoes back to some of the points I made before in part 1, the previous Satansplain episode, but here's another line worth reading. The essence of satanic ritual and Satanism itself, if taken up out of logic rather than desperation, is to objectively enter into a subjective state. Now let me pause right there. This is a good summary of what it's about. Objectively enter a subjective state, otherwise known as a willing suspension of disbelief. Now again, that notion freaks out a lot of atheists who think that suspending disbelief and surrendering your skepticism in any situation is always bad. And the same thing, therefore, as having blind faith. Well, again, this is incorrect. As I've said many times before, humans do this sort of thing in other contexts, this objectively entering a subjective state. They do this for the purpose of using emotions. When you are watching a fictional movie, for example, and it's a really, really good movie, and you're getting really into the characters and the suspense in the story, well, you're suspending disbelief, and you're believing in that movie at least enough to enjoy it. You're not being skeptical and telling yourself at every moment, oh, these people in this scene, well, they're just actors, and that change of scenes from day to night was really a few seconds and not 8 hours like the scene implies. No. If you do that, you're never going to enjoy the movie. So, no, what you do is you suspend disbelief, at least enough to enjoy the movie. That is not the same thing as literally believing that the story in the movie is factual, or that the characters are factual. You can thoroughly enjoy the movie Star Wars and emotionally get really into it, and yet when it's over, you don't literally believe in the Force or Wookiees. And also, you are choosing to do all of this, so what you're doing is objectively entering a subjective state. Now let's take that same principle and make the story instead about the principles and identity of Satanism itself, or wanting to see your own personal desires come about in the real world. Well, you do that, and you've pretty much got the basis of satanic ritual. As I said, this chapter in the book, the one called Concerning the Rituals, is just full of great information that clarifies a lot of things. I could spend a whole episode just reading and commenting on this chapter alone, but let me skip ahead to a couple more lines, because in a minute, I want to get to talking, of course, about the actual rituals in the book. But here's one other line I'd like to read to you and comment on. Quote, Satanic ritual is a blend of Gnostic, Kabbalistic, Hermetic, and Masonic elements, incorporating nomenclature and vibratory words of power from virtually every mythos. Though the rituals in this book are representative of different nations, it will be easy to perceive a basic undercurrent through the cultural variants. Okay, so as I've said many times, an actual fully developed religion calling itself Satanism did not exist until the Church of Satan, but as I've also said before, the terms Satanism and Satanist, both with a lowercase s, those words had existed for a while before that, but they existed as pejoratives. That means a slur term. They were slur terms that Christians used to describe any acts or people they did not like. There were certainly occultists before the Church of Satan. There were certainly practices you might call the dark arts. And if you look at the standard 13-step ritual from the Satanic Bible and ask where the structure of rituals like that come from, you can trace it back to some of those things LeVay just listed. Now, a lot of Christians, being fucking stupid, try to apply that logic in reverse. They say, oh, LeVay just said that satanic ritual is a blend of Gnosticism and Kabbalah and Hermeticism and Freemasonry, so that means Gnosticism and Kabbalah and Freemasonry are all Satanism. No, that does not logically follow. As I said, for example, back in Satansplain episode number 26, you could maybe at best say that satanic ritual has some Masonic DNA, in that The candles and the robes and some of those props and stuff do trace back to practices that some secret societies did centuries ago. But it still does not follow that Freemasons are satanic, or Satanists, or practicing satanic ritual. I mean, to use an analogy, the fact that heavy metal music has its origins in American blues does not mean that B.B. King was a heavy metal musician. No, that is a logical fallacy. But the point here is that as Satanists, we can look at the various mythologies from the past and present and utilize those for the fantasy purpose of ritual. As I explained in detail in the previous Satansplain episode, in part 1, we are not limited to just Christian mythology. But let's get that Christian mythology out of the way first, which is exactly what the Satanic Rituals does, because the first ritual presented in the book, Les Messes Noires, otherwise known as the Black Mass, is what's next. If we put down the Satanic Rituals for a moment and pick up the Satanic Bible, we find an entire chapter about the Black Mass. And that chapter opens with the following words, quote, "No other single device has been associated with Satanism as much as the Black Mass. To say that the most blasphemous of all religious ceremonies is nothing more than a literary invention is certainly a statement which needs qualifying, but nothing could be truer." And then further on in the chapter, LaVey explains, "The usual assumption is that the satanic ceremony or service is always called a Black Mass. A Black Mass is not the magical ceremony practiced by Satanists. The Satanist would only employ the use of a Black Mass as a form of psychodrama. Furthermore, a Black Mass does not necessarily imply that the performers of such are Satanists." Okay, so if the standard satanic ritual is not the Black Mass, and the Black Mass does not, in fact, really have anything to do with Satanism, then what is the Black Mass? And why is there a copy of one in this book, the Satanic Rituals? Well, as the Satanic Bible explains, the infamous Black Mass is more or less just a parody of the Catholic Mass. Mass, for those of you who don't know, is what Catholics call their weekly 1-hour church service that they go to on Sundays or sometimes Saturdays. And as I said, the Black Mass is essentially a parody of that. The Catholic Mass has these prayers like the Our Father. The Black Mass recites those prayers backwards. The Catholic Mass may have an image of a white lamb. The Black Mass may have an image of a black goat. The Catholic Mass gives out a Eucharist host, the little bread wafer. The Black Mass takes the host and defiles it. Catholics view sex as bad. The Black Mass has a nude woman and or an orgy. The Catholic Mass has a crucifix hanging up. The Black Mass has an inverted crucifix. By the way, side note, for all of you annoying fucking nerds out there who love to say, the inverted cross isn't a satanic symbol. It's actually the cross of St. Peter, which is a Christian symbol. Some of you need to be smacked upside the head with a hardcover copy of the Satanic Rituals and learn the concept of context. Go listen to Satansplain episode number 57 if you still don't get it. An inverted cross can be a satanic symbol in the right context, and typically is a satanic symbol in most contexts. And we even have a ritual here in one of our books, the Satanic Rituals, that makes use of that fact. Choke on it, nerds. Now back to the Black Mass. You'll see different variations throughout the centuries of this so-called Black Mass, but again, the bottom line is that it's ultimately just a parody of the Catholic Mass. So, if Satanists didn't compose this ritual, then who did? Well, as the Satanic Bible goes on to explain, it could very well have originated as just scare propaganda created by Catholics themselves. It was a list of the appalling heresies that an inquisitor could accuse somebody of. Or likewise, if you wanted to politically smear anybody, say the Knights Templar, you could accuse them of doing these things listed in the Black Mass. Then later on, you had some groups who wanted to do the Black Mass for real, perhaps as a big fuck you to the powers of the Catholic state. Then later on, you had aristocrats using it in secret societies as an excuse to have an orgy. And then devil worshippers trying to style themselves after more Catholic scare propaganda and this and that. The Satanic Bible goes into a whole history of this sort of thing. But again, the bottom line is that the Black Mass is not the standard satanic ritual. Why? Well, for starters, Satanism is not merely inverted Christianity, as I already explained in full back in part 1. Another thing is that the Catholic Mass itself is already a parody of pagan rituals, in that if you trace back the origins of using the altar in a Catholic Mass and holding this object with the right hand and this object with the left hand and the chalice and the holy water sprinkler and this and that, this is my body, this is my blood, etc., etc. Well, if you trace back the origins of those, you arrive at some ancient pagan rituals. So for that reason, LaVey argues that a Black Mass is kind of redundant. You're just doing a parody of a parody. If you want to celebrate the carnal and the metaphorical forces of darkness, for lack of a better term, then just do that. Try going back to the original pagan rituals and pagan imagery instead of trying to de-sterilize something that the Catholics sterilized. Furthermore, LaVey points out that if you really want to do blasphemy in this day and age, the Black Mass wouldn't really be the way to do it. That's because, unlike how it was in prior centuries, the Catholic Church is not really seen as the power of authority it used to be. You know, it's far from being the sacred cow it used to be. This isn't the Middle Ages anymore. The Inquisition is not here. I mean, for crying out loud, Catholic priest molestation jokes are the norm. They're so normalized, like it's almost hack material. So if you really wanted to do something shocking and outrageous in this day and age, if you really wanted to perform a modern Black Mass, then as the Satanic Bible says, you would blaspheme the things that society says you can't say anything bad about. You blaspheme the modern sacred cows of today. I did this in comedy format several years ago when I did episode 500 of The Devil's Mischief, my comedy podcast. I called it the Black Mass Special, and instead of religion bashing, I played comedy clips and novelty songs saying bad things about marijuana or Star Wars or cats and all these other things people on the internet would crucify you for. I would say that's kind of a pun, but yeah, I don't know. Things which you're not allowed to say bad things about. Having said all of that, the Black Mass is still in the book for 2 reasons. First, well, pretend you're somebody in 1972 who picks up this book in the bookstore, The Satanic Rituals. Now, given the whole reputation of the Black Mass, it would be a disappointment to your average peruser of this book to not see the Black Mass included. I mean, I have a book of pirate songs, you know, old sea shanties that go back to the 1700s or further. And the book explains that Yo Ho Ho and a Bottle of Rum is not, in fact, an authentic pirate song. It's from the book Treasure Island. But they said, well, of course we're going to include this song in the book anyway, because even if it's not authentic, how the hell can you leave that out of a book of pirate songs? So, likewise, we have the Black Mass in the Satanic Rituals for at least that reason. But as I said, there's a second reason. There's another reason why the Black Mass is in there, and that is it can serve as a satanic purpose. There are lots of people out there, Satanists and non-Satanists alike, who have been the victims of Christian religious indoctrination. And deprogramming oneself from that doesn't happen overnight. Again, it's one thing to accept something intellectually, it's another thing to accept it emotionally. If you're that disgusted and frustrated with Christianity to the point where it's eating you from the inside, preoccupying you, well, try going full out with your blasphemy. I suppose you can mindlessly scroll through Christian bashing memes on the internet of varying quality, though that's really a passive action, not an active one. So again, try going full out, which means getting up there and performing the Black Mass. One important thing which I think is worth noting, if you compare the Satanic Rituals Black Mass to any of the other older versions you might find, you'll notice that there's no mention of submission to Satan in a worshiping way, if you look at the Satanic Rituals one. There are mentions of Satan being Lord of the world and being honored, but even with this whole within this whole theatrical context of psychodrama and controlled fantasy. Satanists are not worshiping Satan. Okay, so that's enough of the Black Mass. What other groups of people have historically been branded as supposedly performing ceremonies in dedication to Satan? Well, there's the Illuminati, of course. We're going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, we'll talk about the next ritual in the Satanic Rituals, which is the ceremony of the stifling air. Stay tuned, you are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan, marking the beginning of the Age of Fire and Year 1 Anno Satanas. In 1969, he published the Satanic Bible, codifying Satanism as a religion, the first time it's been done in human history.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of hell, come forth from the pit, bestow the blessings of hell upon us. For we are your children, and we invoke thee this night.
In 2001, I was appointed High Priest of the Church of Satan. In 2007, I published the Satanic Scriptures, further defining and expanding on Satanic philosophy and greater magic ritual.
Hail, Satan full of might! Hail, Satan full of might! Our allegiance is with thee! Our allegiance is with thee! Cursed are they! Cursed are they! The God adorers! The God adorers! And cursed are the worshippers! And cursed are the worshippers! Of the Nazarene eunuch! Of the Nazarene eunuch!
For the past 50 years, the Church of Satan has stood as the sole organization to define and defend Satanism as a religion. And though pretenders to the infernal throne have come and gone, we have stood the test of time and will into the future. Visit churchofsatan.com for more information and read the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Scriptures. Knowledge is the solution for ignorance. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan! Hail, Satan!
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, or whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, on X, and on YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support Satansplain. Though we also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you as always to all of you who support Satansplain in one way or another. Let's get back to the Satanic Rituals. So, what other groups of people have historically been branded as supposedly performing ceremonies in dedication to Satan? As I said before the break, there is the Illuminati, of course, and conspiracy theorists to this day believe in not only a real-life Illuminati to be still in existence, but invariably tie that in with the short-lived Bavarian Illuminati, which did actually exist, and also tie that in with Freemasonry, even though if these conspiracy theorists were to visit their local chapter of the Freemasons, they'd probably be disappointed to see it's just some old guys running a function hall for weddings and bowling league banquets and that stuff. But yeah, conspiracy theorists will also take all of the above and tie that back also to the Knights Templar. So with all of that in mind, we come to the next ritual in the Satanic Rituals, the ceremony of the stifling air. As I said before, all of these rituals have been put into a context that's philosophically consistent with Satanism. To quote a line from the ritual's description, As the Templars had gained power, they had become more materialistic and less spiritual-minded. Rites such as the stifling air, therefore, presented timely and compatible statements to men who had turned from their earlier heritage of self-sacrifice, abstinence, and poverty. At the beginning of this chapter, though, the ceremony is summarized as follows, quote, "It celebrates a reawakening of the flesh and a rejection of past self-denials, and symbolic rebirth is attained through a contrived entombment." So there's the theatrical entombment part of the theatrics of the ritual, where the participants are sitting in a coffin and, later get out. So that's about the ceremony of the stifling air. That's from the introduction. So this is a ritual that takes all of that so-called satanic lore about the Illuminati and Freemasonry and the Knights Templar, and rather than trying to dismiss it and intellectualize it away, takes that sort of initiation ceremony and puts it in a theatrical and psychodramatic, but truly satanic context. Instead of going straight to the next ritual in these Satanic Rituals, I want to skip ahead for a moment to the ritual called Pilgrims of the Age of Fire, subtitled The Statement of Shaitan. As I said in the previous episode of Satansplain, Satanism is just as philosophically anti-Islam as it is anti-Christianity. So, for any idiot Christians out there who still say, "You Satanists only pick on Christianity. I dare you to say something bad about Islam." Well, I think you not only need to be smacked upside the head with a hardcover copy of the Satanic Rituals, but then additionally smacked in the face a few times with the book open to page 151, because that's where we get to this next ritual, Pilgrims of the Age of Fire, the Statement of Shaitan. If you've read the Satanic Bible, then you may remember a mention here and there of the Yazidis. They are described there and elsewhere as devil worshippers, and this is something that has been emphatically denied by the Yazidis and their apologists. It seems that just as Christians have accused various pagans of being devil worshippers, the Muslims have done the same with other peoples of the Middle East. To read you an excerpt from Magus Gilmore's essay, The Right Stuff, quote, "Western audiences have long been intrigued by the exoticism of folk tales from the Arabian Nights, and LaVey had discovered that there was a sect of supposed devil worshippers in the Middle East. Thus, Isaiah Joseph's Devil Worship, the Sacred Books and Traditions of the Yazidis, was purposed for a meditative piece, and how apt was it that the peacock, an avian symbol of pride and essential to Satanists, was embodied in Melek Taus, Melek Taus being a deity of the Yazidis and also one of the infernal names. So the book being referred to here is a book called Devil Worship, the Sacred Books and Traditions of the Yazidis. To read you its description from Amazon, first published in 1919, Isaiah Joseph's exhaustive study of the fascinating and often misunderstood Yazidis of the Near East remains a classic in the literature on obscure and ancient religions. Maligned and persecuted for centuries due to their veneration of the devil under the name Melek Taus, which, as I mentioned, one of the infernal names in the Satanic Bible, Melek Taus, the peacock angel, the Yazidis present a view of the devil not easily understood or appreciated by most minds. The devil not as an evil spirit, opposed to man and goodness, but as the highest angel and personal representative of God on earth. Presented in this work are English traditions of the holy books of the Yazidis, as well as detailed accounts of their customs, ceremonies, and way of life. Okay, so although the Yazidis are theistic, there's obviously something you can extract philosophically here and make it work for Satanism. And at the same time, you get to say fuck you to Islam too, as a nice bonus. So LaVey goes into a lot of detail about the Yazidis and this adaptation in a satanic context. He also talks about William Seabrook, who was somebody who traveled out to see the Yazidis, and he was also known for traveling out to seeing, for example, cannibal tribes in Africa and these other fascinating cultures on the fringe and coming back to report on them. Now, as for this ritual itself, the Statement of Shaitan, Shaitan being the Islam version of Satan, it's filled with lots and lots of readings But one of the things this ritual asks for is that the priest, that is the one conducting the ritual, to have his head shaven, and that the razor used for the shaving to be first washed in the waters of the Zamzam. The Zamzam well is a water well located in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia. In fact, on the night the Church of Satan was founded, Walpurgisnacht 1966, Anton LaVey shaved his head in this same Yazidi tradition, with a razor washed in the waters of the Zamzam. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, well, how the hell could he or anybody else get this water from this special well in the Middle East? Did he have somebody go there with a jar or something? And how the hell would I be able to do this if I wanted to do this particular ritual in the book anyway? Well, my answer to the latter question is this. You can buy this water online. I am serious. You can go to Amazon.com and look up Zamzam water, Z-A-M-Z-A-M. They sell bottles of it. Apparently Muslims use this water too for rituals. So that's why it's readily available, I guess. But anyway, yeah, you can buy a bottle of it yourself and use it in this blasphemous ritual. And some years ago, I remember a Satanist saying that he wanted to perform Pilgrims of the Age of Fire, the Statement of Shaitan, but he was kind of reluctant about shaving his whole head. So a suggestion I gave to him was that maybe just shave his head on the sides above the ears, because there's a line in the Old Testament as part of Levitican law which says don't shave the sides of your head. As I understand it, this is why Hasidic Jews and some Orthodox Jews let the hair on their sides of their head grow long. So there you go. Shave the sides of your head for the ritual, or your whole head for that matter. And in both cases, you can blaspheme all three of the Abrahamic religions at once. That's kind of nice. Let's move on. There's a famous photo from the earlier days of the Church of Satan which shows Anton LaVey in his full ritual attire, holding a sword, and he's surrounded by some Church of Satan members wearing animal masks. What you're seeing there is a photo of some Satanists in preparation for the next ritual in these Satanic Rituals that we're going to look at, Das Tierdrama. And Satanism is, of course, a carnal religion. As we say in Satanic Statement number 7, mankind is indeed an animal, and this ritual is a celebration of that. Das Tierdrama, which is German for literally the animal drama. But culturally speaking, this ritual also brings us to German mythology. Now, you could argue that the Stifling Air ritual has some relationship with the Bavarian Illuminati and thus Germany, because geographically it lines up. But Das Tierdrama goes a lot deeper than that. Let me read you an excerpt from the ritual's introduction to show you what I mean. The devil holds a unique place in German magical tradition. He, or his personification, always triumphs. No matter how methodically he may be relegated to infamy, he invariably winds up the popular favorite. As the inspirer of werewolves, he drove the Goths and Huns to their victories in Europe. As the final protagonist in the Nibelungen saga, he destroyed Valhalla and established his own reign on Earth. He became the hero, or at least the roguish and considerate villain in the miracle plays. Throughout the Christian era, he has held his own in German literature and drama better than any other character derived from the Bible. Dramas in which the devil appeared in short scenes allowed him increasingly lengthy roles, until in many cases he had taken possession of almost the whole play. He was, to be sure, almost always defeated and driven back to hell with great tumult and uproar, probably to satisfy the sense of righteousness of the public. Especially since Faust, Satan is no longer considered as the personification of unmitigated evil. In Faust, though he still quests for human souls, he pities them, as does Nietzsche's Zarathustra, and is depressed that these poor earthborn creatures are so narrow-minded and derive so little pleasure from life. George Bernard Shaw was to echo these sentiments in Man and Superman, in which a very obliging devil does all he can to see to the comforts of his guests in hell. Like George Bernard Shaw's Satan, the German devil is often seen as the catalyst of enlightened and polite behavior, optimistically deserting the misanthropic role of Mephistopheles in Faust. So that's some of the introduction to Das Tierdrama. You can read the rest of the ritual itself in the book, but it is aptly subtitled The Seventh Satanic Statement. Like all the rituals in this book, I think it makes for an inspiring read, even if you don't perform it. There are a lot of calls and responses. You have the option of doing it all in the German or in English. Both translations are offered. Well, this concludes part 2 of our 3-part exploration of the Satanic Rituals. In the third and final part, Satansplain episode number 82, we'll look at the rest of the rituals found in the book, from 1920s science fiction cinema to electricity and synthesized sound frequencies to the dark deities of Russian folklore to the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft to satanic baptisms to the satanic significance of the number 9. There is a lot more in the book to explore. We'll continue this in the next episode. See you then. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.